So you'll notice that the background of the horseman is almost done, except for just this little area down in here. As we eliminate the white, remember we started with a sheet of paper that was all white, and gradually we've been eliminating more and more of that white. And as we do, the white takes on more prominence. Rather than being the absence of a color, white now starts to become a color. We see the moon, the whiteness through the horse here, the lighter sort of yellowy color up there, and of course the whiteness of the girl right now is just, that won't stay white. Most of the background, except for this one bit down here, this one corner down here, is done. Oh, and I've also lightened in here. I was just looking a little too dirty. I didn't care for the dirtiness of that color. Still have the girl to paint and the area down below here. I think what I'd like to do, have this white dealt with, which is going to leave the white of the tail and up in here, a little bit down in here. That white is going to be quite dynamic. So you can see I'm trying to make a little bit of a noisy atmosphere down here. I'm just sort of poking away with some of these colors. This paper is rather absorbent, so it has a tendency to dull the color, and I'm working fairly dry with my brush, and the paper tends to resist that a little bit. So the deadness of the color, not everything is dead. I mean, when the color is built up, it tends to take the paint a lot more readily. I could avoid that by either gessoing the paper or even simply sealing the paper with perhaps acrylic medium. But I don't do that. I have done it. I don't do it all the time anymore. Partly because I figure that the deadness of the color, the absorbency of the paper, as much as it can present certain difficulties, it also rewards me in certain ways. I get another kind of contrast, the contrast of dead color versus more lively color. I think what I'm going to do now is go back to the pastel, and the pastel on top of this is where I get some very, very nice color effects. So you can see that the background is really quite a series of values, all based on kind of a mauve or a blue or a green. And these are colors that I associate with a moonlit atmosphere. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. So you can see I can smear the pastel as well. So there is a direct application which takes the tooth of the paper and the color breaks up in a kind of a nice way. But sometimes I don't want that. Sometimes I want to smear the pigment right into the paper, and that will create a more smooth surface. I can always work on top of that later if I want to. Dry pastel, or chalk pastel as we call it, as opposed to oil pastel. Chalk pastel is basically just pure pigment that is just held together with a binder. And the binder is just barely holding the pigment together. It's the next step away from actually powdered dry pigment. And I actually have some of that too, which I do use on occasion. But this is a better way because I can manipulate it. I can poke it into the paper or the canvas or whatever it may be. I can sort of draw with it, or I can sort of paint with it, perhaps more on the broad side. I use both the broad and the narrow side of the pastel. I'm going to get back into this nice turquoise and just sort of blend that in here. As you can see, there are areas where there are just things reduced right down to line, and the line is a nice relief from all of the shapes, all of the forms that I'm working on here. So there'll be more linear elements entering into the picture. The background here is more or less done. There's still a few places that need to be resolved, and now the end game. call this the end game because this one passage here of the girl at the bottom of the picture is going to determine just what the ultimate colors and values are going to be. I say that's the end game, but the real end game is the final little touches here, there, and everywhere. There's a number of things that I still have to do. This painting is actually rather complicated. You can see I'm treating her right now fairly simply, more so than the horse and rider. Horse and rider is full of all kinds of little textures and busy bits and so forth. And I want to keep her fairly serene. And that's another kind of contrast, by the way. Okay, so I'm using some umbery colors. I want to give her a glow. Maybe she's sunbathing. So anyway, so I'm starting down here because I want to resolve the end of her body, the foot and so on. So I'm just kind of hatching back and forth with the pastel. I'm not applying a whole lot of pressure because I want to control it right now. So you'll notice that I'm still leaving areas of white because I want to get variety into the form, even though I'm saying I'm going about it in a fairly controlled way. I do want to have the best of both worlds. I want to have the variety, but I also want to have in this case, I want to have the control. And you'll notice there's this streak of paint that I did very early on. It's kind of a greenish tone. I'm going to try to leave that because I do like it. Certain things I want to hold on to. The forepart of her body is kind of in the reddish tone, and I want to hold on to that. And I like it not only visually, but I sort of like it from its narrative value as well, as if she's reading something and maybe it's inflaming her. What's inflaming her perhaps is this vision. So I'm just building up these tones in her flesh patiently. I'm reaching for this medium gray pastel because I think now I'm going to eliminate the white of the tail and probably the mane. It will activate whatever remaining bits of white there are. So much of it will be on the horse. Some of it will be down here on her blanket. And to a lesser degree, the sun and the moon. The picture is pretty much done. It's getting very close to being done. And I can be a little more loose now. Just bring a few highlights back into the tail, just to enliven it a little bit, using the kneadable eraser, the good old kneadable, which pulls back the dry pigment. Doesn't work with paint, but it does work with the dry color. Okay, I'm going to just leave that for now and do the mane. I also want to subdue the mane. As much as I like it, I think I would rather have the highlights in the horse's body rather than on the mane so much. One of the good things about doing this kind of a treatment where I'm going to be doing another version of the same subject, in this case, the second version is going to offer me other alternatives, other choices. It's going to be fun to see what that's going to turn out to be. So we still have this to finish. At this stage of this painting, I don't need to do any more of the primary color. I've done plenty. So now it's time to, again, gray back the color. So I'm literally using gray. And I'm just pushing these values back a bit. I may still darken the value in the main. I can actually do some of that just by blending, I think. No, I think I'm gonna have to keep working with the pastel. The picture is pretty much done. Knowing me, I probably will go back and look at it and do a few fine adjustments. But as far as I'm concerned, really, for all intents and purposes, the picture is done. And now we can go on to playing with an idea, part 2.